The night sky over Kyiv erupted once again. Air raid sirens screamed across the Ukrainian capital. Families rushed into shelters. Children were pulled from their beds. And within moments, another chapter of this war unfolded in the darkness. Russia launched one of its heaviest waves of drone and missile attacks on Kyiv in recent weeks, sending shockwaves through the city and leaving destruction spread across multiple districts. The buzz of incoming drones, the thunder of missile strikes, and the terrifying uncertainty of what would be hit next became the soundtrack of another Tuesday morning. By dawn, Ukrainian authorities said the overnight assault had killed at least 11 people and wounded more than 100 across the country, with Kyiv among the hardest hit. And as emergency crews reached the Podilsky district, they found a residential building partially collapsed, with officials warning that residents may still be trapped beneath the wreckage. The attack was not a single strike. It was a sustained barrage across the capital. And fears are growing that the rubble has not yet given up all of its dead. One of the worst impacts in Kyiv hit a residential building in the Podilsky district, where rescuers were digging through heavy rubble after the strike. Local reporting described the hit as part of a rapid sequence of impacts, but the exact strike pattern is still not clear in strong wire reporting. Rescue teams arrived to find mountains of concrete, twisted steel, and shattered glass. Officials said preliminary reports suggested residents remained buried under the collapsed structure. Every minute mattered. Emergency crews worked through the debris, listening for sounds from beneath the rubble that could mean the difference between a rescue and a recovery. Kyiv officials and follow-on reporting said high-rise residential buildings were hit or damaged in multiple districts, including Shevchenkivsky. Fires broke out across damaged structures. Burning fragments rained down on streets already littered with shattered windows and damaged vehicles. Entire neighborhoods woke up to scenes that resembled a war zone, which is what they are, even if the world has grown accustomed to calling them something less. The strikes did not distinguish between military and civilian targets. Authorities reported damage to commercial properties, residential buildings, public facilities, and critical infrastructure. Kyiv officials said civilian infrastructure was hit across the city, including residential areas and public sites. Power outages affected multiple districts. Rescue teams, firefighters, medical personnel, and utility workers were deployed simultaneously across the city, working to restore order while the damage was still being assessed. The breadth of the destruction across multiple neighborhoods suggests an attack pattern that overwhelmed response capacity. Whatever specific target set Moscow intended, the attack on Kyiv was part of a broader assault across Ukrainian territory. Russian strikes were reported in Dnipro, where explosions echoed through residential areas. Kharkiv was also hit in the overnight barrage, and Reuters said the strikes extended across 7 regions, including Kyiv, Zaporizhzhia, and Kharkiv. The geographic spread of the strikes suggests a coordinated operation designed to stretch Ukrainian air defenses across multiple fronts simultaneously, forcing the country to defend its capital, its eastern cities, and its southern infrastructure all at once. That is the military logic behind striking 7 regions at once. Ukraine's air defense network is finite. Every interceptor fired at a drone over Kyiv is one that is not available for a missile heading toward Dnipro. Every battery positioned to protect the capital is one that leaves another city exposed. Russia has learned over 3 years of war that overwhelming volume across dispersed targets degrades Ukraine's ability to protect any single location. The Tuesday barrage appears to have followed that logic precisely. And for the civilians underneath it, the question of whether their city had enough interceptors that night is the question that determined whether they woke up in their bed or under a pile of concrete. The strikes landed hours after Ukrainian President Zelensky addressed the nation with a warning that intelligence reports indicated Russia could be preparing a massive attack. The warning was public, and the scale of the attack that followed was consistent with the kind of mass strike Zelensky said he had been warned about. Whether the advance warning allowed Kyiv to activate its shelters and reduce casualties, or whether the attack was calibrated to overwhelm those preparations, is something the final casualty figures will eventually clarify. But the fact that a head of state publicly warned his country of an incoming strike, and the strike arrived within hours, tells you something about the current phase of this war. Both sides know what is coming, and neither side can stop it. The Russian strikes did not arrive without context. According to Zelensky, Ukrainian forces have carried out a series of operations against Russian oil infrastructure in recent months. He said that between January and May, Ukrainian attacks targeted 15 Russian oil refineries, significantly reducing Russia's refining capacity. If accurate, those strikes represent one of the most consequential attacks on Russia's economic lifeline since the war began. Oil revenues remain critical to Moscow's ability to finance military operations. Any sustained disruption to refining capacity carries both economic and strategic consequences. Moscow has explicitly tied its latest strikes to what it calls Ukrainian terrorist acts, and the timing also fits the wider escalation around Ukrainian attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. Last week, before the Tuesday attack, Russian officials announced what they described as systematic strikes on military-related facilities in Kyiv. Russian state media reported warnings directed at foreign nationals, diplomatic staff, and international organizations operating in the Ukrainian capital. The message was direct: leave Kyiv as soon as possible. Those warnings now carry a different weight after the overnight assault. Whether the warning was genuine or political cover is open to interpretation, but the visible damage to residential areas sharply undercuts Moscow's effort to frame the strikes as narrowly military. The significance of the warning is not just what it says about Russian intentions, it is what it says about the next phase. If Moscow is publicly telling diplomats and international staff to leave a capital city, it is signaling that future strikes may be heavier, more sustained, or targeted at areas where international personnel operate. That puts pressure on every embassy, every aid organization, and every media bureau still operating in Kyiv to make a calculation about whether staying is worth the risk. And if international presence in the capital thins out, Ukraine loses something that matters as much as air defense. It loses the eyes that document what the strikes are doing to a civilian population. One of the clearest recurring patterns in this phase of the war is that Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy targets are followed by Russian mass attacks on Ukrainian cities. Each strike fuels another response. Each escalation creates the conditions for the next. And caught between retaliation and counter-retaliation are millions of civilians who have no say in the military calculations, but absorb the consequences of every one of them. The war is now deep into its third year. Neither side appears willing to back down. Neither side has achieved the kind of decisive advantage that would force the other to the table on terms it would accept. And the civilians of Kyiv, Dnipro, Kharkiv, and every other city in the firing line are living inside a conflict that has become a permanent condition rather than an event with an endpoint. For the families in Kyiv who were pulled from their beds by sirens on Tuesday morning, the geopolitical context does not matter. What matters is whether the building they live in is still standing. What matters is whether their children made it to the shelter in time. What matters is whether the phone call they are waiting for will come. This war has turned ordinary routines into survival calculations. Every night brings the question of whether to sleep in the apartment or in the basement. Every siren resets the clock on a fear that never fully goes away. And every morning that arrives with smoke and rubble instead of silence is a reminder that the war is not something happening elsewhere. It is happening in the room next door, on the street outside, in the building across the road that was standing 12 hours ago. So this is what Tuesday morning produced: a coordinated Russian assault across Kyiv using drones and missiles. A residential building in the Podilsky district collapsed after the strike, with rescuers searching the debris for survivors. Residential and civilian infrastructure was damaged across multiple Kyiv districts, with fires, shattered buildings, and rescue operations stretching into the morning. At least 11 dead, more than 100 wounded. Strikes reported across Dnipro, Kharkiv, and other Ukrainian cities. Zelensky had warned hours earlier that a massive attack was coming. Ukraine has been hitting Russian refineries for months. Russia warned foreigners to leave Kyiv last week, and as the world processes another round of destruction, rescue crews in the Ukrainian capital are still digging through concrete, still listening for sounds beneath the rubble, still hoping to find someone alive under a building that was a home 12 hours ago.